Tales of the Beholder, Book of the Dark, Tale of the Brute. The dust of the western reaches had always tasted of ash and despair, a fitting cradle for the legend of Korgoth. Before his name was a whispered curse in every hearth, before his shadow stretched across half a continent, he was merely a brute, a towering mass of muscle and unbridled fury, born of a nameless tribe that roamed the desolate canyons. But even then he was different. He possessed a hunger, a primal insatiable yearning for the clash of steel, the warmth of potent drink, and the transient pleasure found in the arms of any woman who caught his eye. His first forays were not acts of grand strategy, but instinctual eruptions of violence. Small, forgotten hamlets, nestled in the folds of the gray-scarred hills, were the initial canvas for his monstrous art. An observer might have seen a whirlwind of raw power, Korgoth, an iron giant, cleaving through unprepared defenders with an axe that seemed an extension of his own enraged will. He moved with a speed that belied his bulk, each blow delivered with the force of a battering ram, each roar a declaration of his inherent right to dominate. The villages burned, their meager stores plundered, their men broken, their women taken as spoils. Korgoth never lingered. He would find the strongest brew, drain the casks until his mind swam in a blissful haze, then seek out the most defiant eyes amongst the captives, his desires as simple as they were brutal. The following dawn would see him and his growing band of cutthroats, drawn to his strength like moths to a destructive flame, moving on, leaving behind only smoldering ruins and the lingering stench of fear. Word of the mountain of blood spread like a contagion carried on the harsh winds. Caravans rerouted, towns reinforced their palisades, and folk huddled closer to their hearths, praying to forgotten gods. But Korgoth cared not for prayers or superstitions. His god was the roar of battle, his temple the blood-soaked earth, his sacraments the glug of strong drink and the cries of those he conquered. He was a force of nature, unthinking, unstoppable, a living embodiment of chaos. He did not build an army in the traditional sense, but a tide of destruction. Dispossessed warriors, exiled criminals, and those who craved the thrill of unchecked savagery flocked to his banner, a tattered black cloth stained with the rust of old gore. They saw in Korgoth not a leader to serve, but a champion to follow and to plunder, a fist strong enough to smash any obstacle. He led from the front always. In battle he was a maelstrom. It was said that no man or 10 men could stand against him in fair combat. He would simply wade through the desperate charges, his axe singing its deadly song, until the ground was slick with the fallen. His reputation grew with each smashed stronghold. The petty warlords of the borderlands who once squabbled over tracts of barren land, now found themselves facing a terror that made their own ambition seem childish. Lord Valerius, who styled himself the Iron Fist of the Northern Marches, commanded a garrison of 500 trained soldiers and a stone keep thought impregnable. Korgoth, with barely 1,000 ragged barbarians, did not bother with siege engines. He simply had his men ram the gates until they splintered, then led the charge himself, a bellowing storm of muscle and steel. The battle inside Valerius's keep became a legend, a testament to Korgoth's might. He slew Valerius himself, lifting the armored lord by his throat before tearing his helmet off and crushing his skull with a single, contemptuous blow. The surviving soldiers, witnessing such raw power, threw down their arms and knelt, their faces pale with terror. Korgoth did not accept their surrender. He slaughtered half of them where they knelt, a brutal lesson in the cost of resistance, and took the rest into his ranks, binding them to him through fear. From that day Korgoth's method became clear: total subjugation, absolute fear, and perpetual revelry in the spoils. He did not care for taxation or governance. His capital was wherever his horde camped, usually a pilfered keep or a sacked temple, filled with the aroma of roasting meat, cheap ale, and the mingling scents of sweat and stolen perfumes. Women, taken from their homes and forced into his service, moved through the halls, some defiant, some resigned, all touched by the grim shadow of his presence. Korgoth would drink until he swayed, his deep laugh echoing off stolen tapestries, then gesture for whichever woman appealed to him, her fate sealed by his simple whim. He would take what he desired, then return to his revels, the battle lust and the hedonism, two sides of the same coin to him. Kingdoms further afield, once dismissive of the barbarian troubles in the desolate west, now watched with growing alarm. The kingdom of Eldoria, old and proud, finally mustered its might. King Theron, a veteran of a dozen campaigns, assembled the grandest army the realm had seen in centuries. 20,000 mailed knights, disciplined archers and veteran pikemen, marching under the banner of the Lion of Eldoria. They were confident, righteous, and utterly unprepared for Korgoth. The decisive battle took place on the plains of Andar. From an observer's perspective, it was less a battle and more a grinding, prolonged act of butchery. Korgoth did not employ clever tactics. He simply unleashed his horde, a roaring wave of unwashed, bloodthirsty maniacs, against the disciplined lines of Eldoria. And at the spearhead of that wave was Korgoth himself. He was a blur of motion at the heart of the storm, his colossal axe, now named Skullcleaver, whistling through the air, felling men like wheat. Every swing was imbued with a monstrous strength that shattered shields and sundered armor as if it were paper. He met the charges of noble knights, not with a parry but a direct, bone-shattering collision, often dismounting both horse and rider with a single devastating blow. Arrows bounced off his hardened leather and the sheer force of his will. He seemed immune to pain, driven only by the primal ecstasy of the kill. King Theron, bewildered by the sheer ferocity, ordered his royal guard to form a shield wall around him, but it was futile. Korgoth smashed through. He faced Theron amidst the chaos, a towering, blood-soaked demon. Theron, renowned for his swordsmanship, fought bravely, but his elegant blade was like a toy against Skullcleaver. Korgoth disarmed him with a contemptuous flick of his wrist, then lifted the king by his gorget. Theron choked, his eyes wide with a terror that mirrored every man who had ever faced the barbarian. With a guttural roar, Korgoth ripped the king's head from his shoulders, holding it aloft for all to see. The sight broke Eldoria's army. Panic seized them and they scattered, fleeing in a rout that turned the plains into a slaughterhouse. Korgoth did not pursue for long. He was already turning, his eyes on the royal baggage train, on the casks of fine Eldorian wine, and the captured noble women who would now serve his pleasure. The fall of Eldoria sent shockwaves throughout the known world. The bastion of civilization, the realm thought to be unassailable, had fallen to a barbarian who cared only for slaughter and self-indulgence. His name, Korgoth, was no longer whispered, it was screamed in nightmares. He took Theron's throne not to rule but to sit on it while feasting, his feet propped on the carved armrests, a flagon of the finest meat in his hand, a dozen consorts vying for his attention. He did not issue decrees or build roads. His empire was a vast, desolate expanse of fear and ravaged lands, where towns paid tribute out of sheer terror and the roads lay silent save for the passage of his ever-pillaging hordes. He truly was the strongest man. Legends sprung up around him, that he was a demon spawn, that he could not be killed, that he fed on the fear of his enemies. He had no true friends, only those who feared him enough to follow, or those who served his desires. His revels were legendary for their excess and brutality. He would drink until he passed out, wake to a new day, and immediately demand a sparring partner, or news of a fresh land to conquer. He never tired of battle, never tired of pleasure. The years passed, marked by the steady expansion of Korgoth's terror. He conquered the mountainous kingdom of Forlag, famed for its dwarven fortresses, not by tunneling, but by simply smashing their gates and slaughtering their proud warriors in their own halls. He swept across the fertile plains of the Golden Vale, turning its wheat fields into barren dust bowls and its prosperous cities into monuments to his destructive might. No alliance, no magical defense, no legendary warrior could stand against him. They tried. Kings sent their champions, mages wove ancient spells, grand armies were raised, but all shattered against the unyielding force that was Korgoth. He aged, but not in the way ordinary men did. His hair, once black, was now streaked with gray, but his muscles remained like coiled steel, his eyes still burned with an unholy light, and his roar could still shake the foundations of a castle. He was a living, breathing testament to the power of raw, untamed savagery. He had achieved his simple, brutal desires. He drank the strongest Alash from stolen chalices, surrounded himself with women of every kind, and found constant, exhilarating battle wherever he turned. The lands he controlled, an observer would note, were not truly ruled. They were simply occupied, bled dry, and kept in a perpetual state of terror. There was no justice, no law, save for Korgoth's whim. He was the undisputed master, the most feared man alive, his very name enough to make hardened warriors tremble. He had risen to the apex of power, not through cunning or wisdom, but through pure, unadulterated force. And so, his story continues, not towards a definitive end, for Korgoth was not a man who sought conclusion, but a force that simply existed. He was the eternal barbarian, the living embodiment of havoc, forever raging, forever conquering, forever indulging. His legacy was the desolation he left in his wake, the unending fear he instilled, and the chilling truth that sometimes, the mightiest force in the world cares for nothing but its own savage desires. and in a dark, unforgiving world that was often more than enough. End of the tale. Ideals without power is empty and power without ideals is savage.